Exactly.
Andrea Tessmann, many questions I have afoot. Not what you were doing on this day in 1972, though.
Oh, well, what questions do you have for me, Kirk Buchner?
Oh, but before I get there, October 21st, 1972 is the specific day we're going to look at. I was but an infant. But if you were going to the movies, there was two interesting films you might have chose from. Last Tango in Paris, starring Marlon Brando, or as my mom liked to call it, the last time Marlon Brando was hot. I never wanted to hear my mom talk about any guy who was hot. But, yeah, I guess. Or you might have saw a new film by by someone who just did her first film, and someone who we're probably going to cover at some point. Diana Ross in Lady Sings the Blues. At some point, we might cover the Supremes. Sports fans! The day after this day, the Oakland A's began their 3-year run atop when they defeated Cincinnati to win the first of 3 straight World Series. The swinging A's, this was a dynasty. Reggie Jackson, Catfish Hunter, Raleigh Fingers, Vida Blue. Look at those names. Those are awesome. But if you were listening to the radio, you might have heard, depending on where you are, because this song was banned some places. You might have heard about My Ding-A-Ling.
Nobody wants to hear about your penis, Kirk.
Well, no, but maybe you might want to hear about My Ding-A-Ling. And I just want to point out that someone did marry me and loves hearing about it.
Fair.
Yes.
You have been married twice.
Well, the first one. That's true. We don't want to talk about that first wife. And who might be
anyway.
She might be listening from the trailer park or wherever the hell she's at. But true story. Today, I ran into a neighbor who moved in across the street from me here in lovely Barbados, an American couple who are here escaping COVID for 5 months. Told her about my little show, and she said, "Oh, what are you going to talk about tonight?" I said, "My Ding-A-Ling." So,
interesting.
This double entendre.
I think we need one minor housekeeping fact be taken care of. Speaking of today, as in today, it is the 40th anniversary of John Lennon's death.
Yeah. That's crazy. And this is going to play in a bit, I think. I'm glad you brought that up. Lennon loved Chuck Berry. Just absolutely loved Chuck Berry. I don't know. Actually, I do remember where I was when I heard this. And I was starting to watch football then. Howard Cosell announced this on Monday Night Football during a telecast. And that's where actually a lot of Americans, and I guess this Canadian as a little kid, heard that for the first time, that John Lennon had passed. It was, 40 years today. I still remember, like, just all the news, just being obsessed with this. This is one of my first childhood memories of a significant death, and like that a year after, maybe less than a year, I remember all the coverage when there was the attempted assassination on Ronald Reagan. So these are like a sort of, I guess, my JFK moments, sort of a callback to last week when we were talking about the singing nun. But Chuck Berry, what did you know about Mr. Chuck before? This is like, for me, this is a god. Musically, anyway.
I honestly didn't know a whole lot about him. I mean, I knew he was kind of a weirdo performer in the sense that he never used his own band. He would just have whoever was producing the show put together a local band, and he would fire musicians mid-set if he didn't like what they were doing. And he would kind of show up last minute, often late, jump on stage without even a sound check, and then disappear immediately after the show. And I mean, I knew he's arguably the creator of rock and roll, so he's essentially a god. So I guess I knew like some random things. And obviously I'm well acquainted with his catalog of music.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really looked
Studied
much into him as a person.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck Berry is someone I've always sort of been very familiar with. Having said that, and I think you and I have talked about this before in a previous show, actually even before we even decided that we were going to do a show, that I've been immersing myself in pre-rock music. A lot of late 40s, early 50s jump blues, and just really rock and roll's origin. So I've been listening to a lot of the 50s, even before we decided that we were going to do this. So I've got sort of like my Mount Rushmore of 50s music, and I kind of want to get your take on it. So it's Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley. And with each one of them bringing something very unique to the table. As we're going to talk more about Chuck really, I consider him the architect of rock and roll, and dare I say the soul. Little Richard was the showmanship of rock and roll. I mean, he'll tell you, well, when he was alive, he would have told you that he was the true father of it. I think it's more Chuck than Little Richard, but nevertheless, he's still my top four. Buddy Holly is the man who brought speed and just sort of showed that you can be a geek. And I almost think that, although I've never really read this before, but I think one of the first true stars of alt rock, I'll argue, is Buddy Holly. And then Elvis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Elvis, he's the face. The least talented of the quartet, the most successful of the quartet, but without him, a whole shit ton of people in the 50s weren't going to listen to rock and roll music. Because sadly, you needed the pretty boy white face to do it.
Yeah.
And not just a pretty boy. I mean, we'll touch on Elvis at some point, but...
Elvis had mass appeal. Well, he had just enough edge with his gyrating hips to make him controversial, but he played to his base.
Well, I think, my dad loves Elvis. Again, my dad making another return to this show. Also, his memories of Chuck Berry is, oh yeah, he sang. So, thanks, Dad. He brought a lot to the table on this one, too. Peter Buchner, everyone. But yeah, Elvis was, and pardon my language here, he was the artist that the girls wanted to fuck, and the men understood why their girlfriend wanted to do it.
Yep.
Safe to say?
Safe to say. Absolutely.
Now, after I'm sure doing some research, maybe you probably don't want to let maybe Chuck Berry babysit.
Yeah, that's a little disturbing.
It is, but let's roll out his catalog of 1950s hits. I got another one of the few bits here that I've got. Right. I mean, look, these hits in the 50s are, and again, anyone listening and you're not familiar with 50s music, for me, just start at Chuck Berry. Just listen to that. You can do a great thing. Just like iTunes has a great little set list. Rock and roll music, School Day, Roll Over Beethoven, Maybelline, and Johnny Be Good, which for those who watch Back to the Future, no, was not done by Marty McFly.
Oh, come on.
Well, Marvin, it's your cousin. It's your cousin. You know that sound you've been looking for? Well, listen to this. So Marty McFly created rock and roll music.
Of course he did.
We could. He definitely could. Still a star into the early 60s, putting out good music, but it didn't take long for virtually everyone of his generation to be rendered to the oldie circuit. And for Chuck Berry, he was already there in a way. Rock music, if we let's say we argue that it started in 1955, and that's certainly moving the goalpost around, Chuck was already 29 or 30. So by this point in 1972, what would that have made him? In his early 40s. Younger than I am. Now, looks older than I am, I'd like to say. But then I'm a little bit biased. It's the blonde streaks I have now. It looks good on me.
You're quite well preserved, Kirk.
Thank you. It's the alcohol and the 20 excess pounds of fat. It smooths out the wrinkles. It doesn't hurt.
I figured the alcohol preserves you, right?
We'll run with that. With that. So Chuck didn't have a hit, or like anything that charted on, even on the R&B charts, like on any chart, until from 1965 on. So how does this happen? And I thought, this is such a strange... Actually, before we go in there, this was a request, and I want to give a shout-out to the individual who requested that. Someone who I actually interviewed on my show previously. We'll call it his stage name, because it's not his real name, but under Twitter, Alex_Voltaire, big follower of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he put out this amazing thing that I talked to him about, where he mapped out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and how he would like to see the ceremonies for the next 6 years. And we went through it, and it was just a great conversation. And over Twitter, he just responded to something. He says, like, hope you're going to cover this. It's like, well, as a matter of fact, I think we will. So shout out to him, and for anyone on Twitter who want to just follow us, great things about rock history and actually U.S. politics by a guy who lives in Singapore, a former American, well, still American. Just want to give a shout out where it's due. So before
this song.
Yeah, this song. So before I'm doing all this, I was getting so confused too. Because before I really took a good look at this, like, how does somebody with this incredible back catalog of music, and he never came close to number one. The highest he ever charted was number 5 with Maybelline.
Oh, I thought he got to number 2 with something.
Oh, did he? Okay, you know what?
Maybe it wasn't on Billboard, but still, with all of his stuff, you think something would have gone, like, I think he had 6 top 10 hits, but yeah, no other number 1.
Yeah, it's actually number 5 was his highest. So he did, like, on the R&B charts, he did well.
Oh.
But yeah, number 5 also with School Day, that also went. Oh, sorry, you're right. Number 2, Sweet Little 16, which, yeah.
It's especially creepy when you find out that he was arrested for transporting a teenager, 14-year-old, across state lines.
That, which happened, in 1959? He went to jail for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So actually, here's a bit of advice and I think nobody does this anymore, thank God. If you're going to do a song about a teenager, please be one. That's really all I've got to say.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
There was really a thing in the 50s of, like, well, I guess young musicians singing about teenagers. But these guys would have been in their 20s, potentially even 30s. Like, it was a weird thing, but I guess, yeah, it was a weird thing.
This happened all the time. Well,
yeah.
Let's see. Chuck would have been, let's see. Let's go on this rabbit hole, Andrea.
He was born in...
29?
What? 26.
26, okay. So...
And he was arrested in 62.
Okay. Sweet Little 16 came out in 58. So... Maybe he was thinking in metric. Well, 16 it's really 14. He's going in, like, dog years? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He was still, 34 at this point? Like, no. That's just gross. Don't do that.
What would be the song then? Sweet Little 16. So if it's 14, and I think I can get away with it? I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a song title here.
14 dressed up as an adult?
You're trying to go like with 6 dressed up as a 9 or something like that.
3 dressed up as a 9.
3 dressed up as a 9, yeah. Yeah, which is pretty much if you ever go clubbing in Montreal. Well, that's how I remembered it. That's how actually I've described it to people who are going to go to Montreal for the first time. So go to the clubs. Even the 3s think they're hot. I think I actually said that. Send your hate letters, to kirk.buchner@notinhalloffame.com.
So anyways, we're in 1972.
Yeah.
And you've got... Okay, so I was, like you, I think very confused about everything about this situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like early 70s, there was a big 50s revival thing.
There's that.
You know, you've got Grease, you've got American Graffiti, you've got a lot of this nostalgic sort of retro. You've got some of the really early punk rock had, you know, sort of a 50s feel to it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this nostalgia for the 50s. The boomers aren't quite old enough to really remember it. Like, I just think that it was sort of, well, kind of like we feel about the 80s.
I think that's part of it, but I think there's a couple other tropes here in effect that we've talked about before. You know, like the one being the power of a DJ.
Yes, definitely. So the song was recorded at a festival in July.
Yes, in London.
And I think there's multiple things here that are responsible for its success. You've got Chuck Berry being an incredibly charismatic, outgoing performer. He was he loved the stage, he loved the audience, he loved the attention, and he hammed it up on stage like a vaudeville performer.
Mm-hmm. He did.
So you've got a live concert. This wasn't a new song. The song had been recorded in the 60s. I think it's been recorded a couple of times.
Actually, can we look at that? Versions. Can we look at that first?
Sure.
Yeah, because that's another thing, sort of like my early rock self-history lessons. Because it was originally recorded and written by a gentleman named Dave Bartholomew, who was just this great prolific songwriter. Not necessarily a great performer, but a lot of the great hits by Fats Domino, the biggest one, Ain't That a Shame, that was done by Bartholomew. So this was one of his just throwaways that he did that got picked up and picked up and picked up. And needless to say, with Chuck being a peer of Dave's, this really wasn't, it was just something that was probably, I'm guessing, in the back of his head. He's doing this festival, but also knows that it's going to be recording. So it's like, oh, well, why not? Here's a throw-in, and I can have fun with the crowd.
I got the feeling that he did this song often at live performances because he got the reaction from the crowd.
He could have.
He does it as a kind of old-school call-and-answer type thing that crowds love. Mm-hmm. You know, festival crowds, they want to feel involved. They want to sing back with the greats. So I kind of got the impression that this was not a one-off. This was something that he did regularly.
Could be. I couldn't figure that out, but you're probably right.
And he did record a version of it called My Tambourine or something at one point earlier on.
That's true, yeah, in 68, you're right.
And he cleaned up the lyrics a bit here and there. And then, but often, I guess, when he was performing it, he, you know, ad-libbed and changed the lyrics and played around with it. It's about as simplistic as it gets. It's basically Little Brown Jug with a whole lot of innuendo. And I think if you listen to the live recording, I'm pretty sure he just made up the one verse about, for all of you who don't sing along, it's because you're playing with your ding-a-lings.
Yeah, right at the end. So I just want to, I'm not going to do sort of, well, maybe I will. Should we do another spoken word session by Kirk?
I think that's a good idea, Kirk.
Wow.
I think it suits this song to do your special style of spoken word poetry.
Okay. When I was a little bitty boy, my grandmother bought me a cute little toy. Silver bells hanging on a string. She told me it was my Ding-A-Ling. My Ding-A-Ling, my Ding-A-Ling. I want to play with my Ding-A-Ling. I could go. Should I go on? Maybe not. It's basically the same idea.
I think you need to do one more verse.
Okay. And then Mother took me to grammar school, but I stopped all in the vestibule Every time that bell would ring, catched me playing with my Ding-A-Ling.
My Ding-A-Ling, my Ding-A-Ling. Yeah. So, so that's the gist of it. The verses are equally raunchy. One about swimming through the river with snapping turtles and how hard it is to swim when you have both hands on your Ding-A-Ling.
Mm-hmm.
It's all Inuit. It is, but it's silly. It gets the crowd engaged, and so it was recorded at this show. This festival also, Pink Floyd was on after. So it wasn't just him being recorded, and I heard varying stories if he knew it was being recorded or not. I also don't think he really cared. I think he just was like, yeah, let's have fun with this. So there's the upbeat fun. You can tell he's having fun.
Absolutely. In
the recording. You can hear with he's got the women singing the, my, and then the guys going Ding-A-Ling, and it's all very high energy and fun. So I get why they put it on the recording, even though it's a bit weird. But then to go back to your point about the radio, because it was on a recording. It wasn't released as a single.
No.
At the time. It was just on this. I mean, in the 70s, they did a lot of live at recordings.
Right.
You know, everybody had live recordings released. I don't know if they do it so much anymore because the quality of live performances isn't even close to what the quality of recording of.
Well, there's just so much out there. I mean, the demand for the live album is it's just not there anymore.
No, and I think a lot of our current stars aren't necessarily quite as talented as some of the prior ones,
too.
And maybe need a bit of studio editing to get the sound there.
Well, but so much of them are just like electronic and whatnot. Like, as much as I respect the hell out of like these top DJs, like if I was younger and I would go to concerts like that, like granted, I mean I still could, I suppose. I'm not gonna go to a concert of I don't know, like who's a top DJ? Not Diplo, just Deadmau5 or something like that. Why am I gonna go to a concert to watch some guy in front of his computer? I mean, like that's.
I really enjoy electronic music, and but not all of it, because you say electronic music, but it's so widely varied in terms of style and also the amount of work that they do in terms of creating their music. And I was so annoyed. I went to a show in Victoria once that I swear the two DJs that were there, like, not huge name, but decent, like mid-range, enough to draw a crowd in Victoria as you know, an actual show. And they basically just stood behind their computers. They weren't even pretending that they were mixing or doing anything there. They were just like hamming it up in front of the crowd and then ducking behind the speakers to do blow and then coming out and like hamming it up for the crowd. I swear they were like hidden almost as much as they were on stage. And then, yeah, it was just ridiculous. I'm like, this is bullshit. But at the same time, there are artists who are legitimately creating music on stage.
Sure.
Yes, it's behind a computer, but it still is their work and their creation, and, you know, they're actually performing. So, you know, I don't go to nobody goes to any shows these days, but I haven't really been in years, but I've been to some great festivals and stuff. So,
well,
you know,
that's my old
musical taste all over the place.
Well, so
that's a total
as is
rant.
mine.
So you should have brought me back by now.
Well, yeah, but I'm old and cantankerous, so like I should have brought you back. No, you're the glue of this show. I'm sort of like I'm the star, but you're the superstar. If that makes any sense. I mean, like I might have the first billing only because I set well.
It's your show.
Sure.
Okay, so back to your Ding-A-Ling.
Back to my Ding-A-Ling, yeah. So radio DJs back in the power, when they had that power, played it, but then radio stations, some of them started to ban it. And what happens when you tell people you can't listen to it or you can't see something? What happens?
Everybody wants to listen to it.
Absolutely. So here you have a cheesy song that really had no business becoming a single, becomes a single because people brought attention to it. And this happens over and over and over, and it still happens today. And people will never learn. All these right-wing religious groups or left-wing, it doesn't matter what
Prohibition doesn't work.
Yeah. That's all you do is you bring more attention to anything you're trying to prevent. And here you would then have somebody who, then you tackled it earlier. Chuck Berry was a name that people in their 30s, 40s knew. Little kids, it's about my Ding-A-Ling. It's funny. Teens, it's like this is the first thing that's really funny when you're a teenager is like fart humor. This is fart humor.
It absolutely is. It is the sort of thing that if I played this for my 10-year-old nephew, he would just be in stitches laughing.
Absolutely.
And probably wouldn't stop singing it for weeks. Aha, I know what to give my brother for Christmas.
And sure enough, we have a big hit out of nowhere because people wanted to hear something that people were told they shouldn't. And it's just that simple. And really, this was something where I wondered, like, how the hell was this is number one? Well, I don't wonder it anymore. We answered it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird one-off thing, but as we've found in this podcast, there's a lot of weird one-off hits out there for various reasons.
I think in some ways, Andrea, that Chuck Berry is sort of one of the luckiest one-offs. Or lucky, and it's not that he's a one-hit wonder. He's not that at all. But commercially, this was his biggest hit. It turned out to be one of his commercially biggest albums, too. But as he continued to tour, I mean, Chuck never had another top 40 hit again. Well, he had one off this album, and that was it. But he was still someone who people would pay to see. He could live off his name. And if you went to a Chuck Berry concert anytime after 1973 till the time he stopped performing, and because he just died in 2017. He lived till the ripe old age of 90. So I don't know when he stopped performing. If he didn't play My Ding-A-Ling, you wouldn't have gave a shit if you were a Chuck Berry fan, I think.
Yeah, I don't think a Chuck Berry fan was there to hear My Ding-A-Ling particularly, but also he genuinely enjoyed the song. I think he enjoyed the crowd reaction to the song. He didn't think it was any worse than any of his other songs.
Right.
Even though he didn't write it and he wrote pretty much everything else he performed.
Mm-hmm.
But he just...
Well, he took it for what it was.
He took it for what it was, and he enjoyed playing it, and people enjoyed engaging with it.
And that's, I think, a big part of what sort of like made this song in a way special, just what made him special in a lot of ways. He was a great performer. Yeah, we kind of touched on he wasn't exactly maybe the greatest individual off of the stage. I think there was a lot of musicians like that. There were some assault charges, as I'm sure you've read also. There's a bit of a complicated legacy with Chuck Berry that gets glossed over. Maybe it shouldn't. And I'll admit, Andrea, I shouldn't, but I can't help but give him a pass because I just love his music so much. And I know that's not right, but I just tell it like it is. I know I'm not alone in that.
You have to look at things through a glass of the era and the culture. I don't believe in looking at everything from a 2020,
Well, you can't.
This is what society is today point of view. Because if a current day musician in their 30s was traveling around with a 14-year-old, that would be enough for cancel culture to take over and we'd never hear from them again. But the 50s was a different era, a different time. I'm not saying that his personality and what he does and did is okay, but I'm not going to stop listening to his music because of it.
Right. Yeah.
But I also still listen to Michael Jackson. So
I had it in the back of my mind when you said that sentence too.
Well, Michael Jackson isn't even alive. It's not like he's profiting from it. So there's that.
Well, it's like the new, now old joke, talk about cancel culture and sort of left-wing thinking. So you know what his pronouns are, right?
Whose pronouns?
Michael Jackson's.
No.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson jokes will never get old.
No, they won't. Unlike his victims.
No, some of them may never get old either. But anyway.
Yeah. Let's wrap my Ding-A-Ling in a bow here, huh?
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, Chuck, I love you still. I recommend, please, everyone, just listen to some of his old back catalog. You'll hear a lot of today's modern music from it, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. I truly feel that way. And I guess I want to say that because I know we're not going to probably go into Chuck Berry too much into this. Oh, actually, I will sort of say this. So I sent you a YouTube video when I knew that we were going to be doing this. So Chuck Berry, here's another thing I want everyone to YouTube. So Chuck Berry's what he was the hero. I don't know if hero is the right word, but like one of the big influences of someone you mentioned earlier, John Lennon. And Lennon played with Berry on the Mike Douglas show, which for people who don't know what that is, in the 70s, that's when daytime shows were pretty serious. That was actually where you're getting your really good serious talk shows. So there was Berry playing with Lennon and his band, which included Yoko Ono. Yoko doesn't add a whole lot musically other than bonging on a bongo or tambourine and just going something like that. Does that sound all right?
It was pretty. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Please don't do it again.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever come up again. And just did that during their singing, and just you can see Chuck's eyes are like, what the hell is this shit?
And then they shut her mic off.
Yeah, they shut her mic off, which is just perfect. I can just imagine sort of like in the room when they're deciding that one. And then I guess when that airs and then John and Yoko are looking back and she's going like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you that Pauline and I wanted to dress up as John and Yoko for Halloween once?
Why didn't you? That would have been great.
Well, because there was never a couple's theme where it ever sort of happened. Yeah, so like my sign was going to be give peace a chance, and her sign was going to say, he dead, I get money.
There's still opportunities for that.
There's still, once we're allowed to sort of like gather again, and once I'm in another country. Halloween isn't a big deal here in Barbados. But moving on. What do we have next week? We passed on your choice to do this request, so it got a push. What's your request for next week? What do we got?
All right. So we're only going 2 years further into the future.
Okay.
We're going to 1974.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to probably one of the greatest one-hit wonders of all time.
Okay.
Everybody will be kung fu fighting.
Yes. I love this. Carl Douglas. There was fucking
Carl
Billy
Douglas.
Chin and little Sammy Chong. Here comes the big boss. Hoo-wah! Let's get it on. Didn't think I'd know it this well, huh?
I think the song has stood up both incredibly well and incredibly poorly through the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can have some fun with it.
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait for this one. Awesome. All right, well, with that, the bar is closed. No,
I bid you adieu.
I bid you adieu. I got to come up with a better closing for this. Well, they're not all gems. All right, stay safe, Andrea.
Right. Good night, Kirk.
Thank you so much for listening. There's going to be a lot more content regularly from us at nonhallofame.com. And with that, stay safe, everyone.